Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's Agency Accelerator podcast. I'm your host, Rob DaCosta, and today we're diving into a topic that's crucial for every agency owner and every leader, and that is the importance of boundaries in your agency. Now, you might be thinking boundaries, isn't that something we talk about in personal relationships? Well, absolutely, but boundaries are just as vital in your professional life, especially when you're running an agency. So in today's episode, we're going to explore why setting and maintaining clear boundaries is absolutely essential for your health of your agency, your client relationships, your team dynamics, and most importantly, yourself. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you found yourself working late into the night because a client expects immediate responses? Or maybe you've taken on a project that's outside of your agency's wheelhouse just because you couldn't say no. These are classic examples of boundary issues in agency life. Boundaries matter because they protect your time, your energy, your agency resources, and most importantly, your sanity. They help you maintain focus on what you do best, ensure fair compensation for your work, and promote a healthy work-life balance for both you and your team. Without clear boundaries, you risk burnout, scope creep, difficult client relationships, and even team turnover. On the flip side, when you establish and maintain healthy boundaries, you set the stage for sustainable growth, more profitable client relationships, and a happier, more productive team. And you find a way of staying in love with your agency because you are running it rather than it running you. So in today's episode, we'll break down the different types of boundaries you need in your agency, discuss what happens when these lines get blurred, and give you some practical tips on how to establish and maintain healthy boundaries. So whether you're just starting out or you've been in the agency game for years, this episode is going to give you some valuable insights and perhaps reminders to help your agency thrive. So let's dive in. I'm Rob DaCosta, and this is the Agency Accelerator podcast. As someone who has stood in your shoes, having started, grown and sold my own agency, I know just how it feels in the ups and downs of agency life. So this podcast aims to ease your journey just a little by sharing mine and my guests' experiences and advice as you navigate your way to growing a profitable, sustainable and enjoyable business. So now that we've established why boundaries are so crucial, let's dive into the different types of boundaries you need to consider in your agency. Now, I'll break this down into three main categories: agency boundaries, client boundaries, and team boundaries. So let's start with the agency boundaries. These are like the overarching rules that define how your agency operates. First up is working hours and availability. Now, look, it's tempting to be available 24/7, especially when you're just starting out. After all, we all want to be helpful and go the extra mile, which incidentally is a term I really dislike. But trust me, that's a fast track to burnout. Set clear business hours and stick to them. This doesn't mean that you can't occasionally work late or on weekends, but it shouldn't be the norm. Next, consider the services that you offer. It's important to clearly define what your agency does and what it doesn't do. Trying to be everything to everyone because you want to be helpful and go the extra mile often leads to mediocre work and stretched resources. Lastly, in this category, let's talk about pricing and payment terms. These are critical boundaries that directly impact your bottom line. So be clear about what your rates are or what the price for the service is, when and how you expect to be paid, and what happens if a client doesn't pay on time. Okay, so moving on to client boundaries, these are the rules of engagement for your client relationships. So firstly, establish clear communication channels and response times. Do you communicate via email or phone calls? How quickly can clients expect a response? Setting these expectations up front can prevent a lot of frustration further down the line. And you need to stick to them because the minute you blur those boundaries, you set new expectations with the client. Secondly, be crystal clear about the scope of work for each project. What exactly are you delivering? What's not included? This helps prevent scope creep and ensures everyone, that's you, your team and the client, are all on the same page. Thirdly, set revision limits. Unlimited revisions can drain your resources and eat into your profits, so decide how many rounds of revisions, if this is appropriate, are included in your standard package and what additional revisions will be an additional cost. Finally, let's discuss team member boundaries. These are crucial for maintaining a healthy work environment and retaining top talent. Start with clear role definitions. Each team member needs to know exactly what their roles and responsibilities are, and therefore what they're not expected to do as well. Now, I'm not trying to create jobs worths here. We're just trying to create really clear expectations and ownership throughout your agency. Next, respect and encourage a good, healthy work-life balance. This might mean policies around after-hour emails or flexible working arrangements. And remember, when we start to blur those boundaries, we set new expectations. Lastly, be clear about decision-making authority. Who has the final say on what? This prevents confusion and empowers your team to work more efficiently. Remember, these boundaries aren't about building walls or creating jobs worths. They're about creating a framework that allows your agency, your clients, and your team to thrive. So I hope that's all really clear. And in the next part of the podcast, I want to explore what happens when these boundaries get blurred. And it's not a pretty picture. So when our boundaries get blurred, the consequences can be far-reaching, affecting your agency as a whole, your client relationships, your team dynamics, and your own personal life. So let's start at the agency level. When agency boundaries become fuzzy, three main issues tend to crop up. First of all, overwork and burnout, because when you're always on, responding to clients at all hours and taking on more than you can handle, burnout is absolutely inevitable. This not only affects your well-being, but can also lead to decreased quality of work and poor decision making. Secondly, scope creep and undercharging. Without clear boundaries on your services and prices, you might find yourself doing a ton of extra work without compensation. This eats into your profits and can make projects drag on indefinitely. And as I say to my clients, are you a charity or are you a business? Because when you're doing loads of work, when you're over-servicing for free, then you are definitely becoming a charity. Thirdly, loss of focus and specialization. Look, if you're saying yes to every request because you really want to be helpful, regardless of whether it's a really good fit for your expertise, you risk becoming a jack of all trades, a master of none. And this can dilute your agency's brand and make it harder to command premium rates. And it also makes it harder to service clients when you're doing work that isn't quite in your wheelhouse. Moving on to client relationships, blurred boundaries can lead to a host of problems. First of all, unrealistic expectations. Look, if you've been overly accommodating, clients might start expecting immediate responses, endless revisions, or services outside of your core offerings. This is something that we really dig into in my group coaching program, where we talk about the difference between a standard service and an extra, and how it's all in the eye of the beholder rather than what you actually do. This leads to our second point, which is difficult clients demanding more. Once expectations are set, it's hard to dial them back. You might find yourself dealing with clients who constantly push for more, leading to stress and strained relationships. Lastly, these issues often result in decreased profitability. You're working harder, but not necessarily smarter, and definitely not more profitably. Now let's look at how blurred boundaries affect team dynamics. First up is role confusion. When roles and responsibilities aren't clearly defined, team members might step on each other's toes, or important tasks might fall through the cracks. This often leads to decreased productivity. If your team is constantly interrupted by out-of-hours requests or asked to take on tasks outside of their role because they're not really clear and they want to say yes, their efficiency and output will suffer. Finally, all of these issues can contribute to higher turnover rates. Team members who feel overworked, undervalued, or constantly stressed are more likely to look for opportunities elsewhere. The bottom line is this: while it might seem easier in the short term to be flexible with boundaries, to be accommodating, to be helpful, the long-term consequences can be severe. You risk creating an unsustainable business model, damaging client relationships and losing valuable team members. But don't worry, if you've recognized some of these issues in your own agency or in your own life, all is not lost. In the next section, we'll discuss some practical strategies for establishing and maintaining healthy boundaries, even if you're starting from a place where the lines have already been blurred. Okay, now that we understand the importance of boundaries and the consequences of blurring them, let's dive into some practical tips for establishing and maintaining healthy boundaries in your agency. Now, even if you're starting from a place where the boundaries are already currently unclear, these strategies can help turn things around. So first and foremost, communication is key. This means documenting your policies and expectations. It means creating a clear onboarding document for your clients that outline your working hours, response times, and project processes. For your team, develop a comprehensive employee handbook that clearly states roles, responsibilities, and company policies. Now, these things are super important. I know they can feel quite tedious, but they're vital if you want to grow in a profitable, sustainable, and enjoyable way. And they're all topics that we really dig into in the group coaching program, The Self-Running Agency. Now, regular check-ins with clients and team members are also crucial. Use these opportunities to revisit and reinforce boundaries, address any issues, and make adjustments as needed. The second key to maintaining boundaries is all about consistency. This starts with you as the agency leader setting the example and leading by example. If you say you don't work weekends, then don't send an email on a Saturday afternoon. Your actions speak louder than words. It's also important to train your team members on boundary management. Teach them how to communicate effectively with clients, when to escalate issues, and how to protect their own time and energy. Now, here's the big one that many agencies really struggle with, and that is learning to say no. It's not easy, especially when you're trying to grow your business and you want to do a great job and you think the way to keep a client is by just saying yes to everything. However, that isn't right, and it is absolutely essential that you learn to say no and push back in a professional manner. So develop techniques for declining politely but firmly. For example, instead of a flat no, try saying, while we're not able to take that project on now, here's what we can do. Or we can't do this task this month, but maybe we can do it next month. Or yes, we can do that task and the additional fee will be this. This approach maintains the relationship while still protecting your boundaries. When appropriate, offer alternatives. If the client requests a service that you don't provide, consider referring them to a trusted partner. This adds value for your client whilst maintaining your own boundaries. Lastly, implement regular boundary audits. So set time aside quarterly or maybe twice a year to assess your current practices. Are your documented policies still serving you well, and is everyone using them? Are there areas where boundaries are starting to slip? Use these audits to make the necessary adjustments. Remember, setting and maintaining boundaries is not a one-time task. It's an ongoing process that requires attention, refinement, and reinforcement as your agency grows and evolves. Also, keep in mind that whilst these changes can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're shifting from very loose, blurred boundaries, the long-term benefits are definitely worth it. You'll likely find that you're able to work more efficiently, maintain better relationships with clients, and create a more positive work environment and maintain your own sanity. In the end, strong boundaries don't limit your agency. They create the structure and focus that allows your agencies to thrive and grow. Okay, another short but hopefully action and value packed episode for you, and I really appreciate you tuning into the podcast this week. Now, before we wrap up, I have a quick favor to ask. If you found value in today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, and also please do think about leaving a review. Now, you might be wondering why this matters. Well, your subscription and most importantly your reviews do more than just make me feel good, although of course I definitely like that too. They help other agency owners and leaders discover this podcast. The more subscribers and positive reviews we have, the more visibility we get on the podcast platforms. This means we can reach and help more people just like you who are working to build a successful agency. Your review also gives me valuable feedback. This helps me understand what topics really resonate with you and what you'd like to hear more about. And this allows me to continually improve and provide content that truly serves your needs. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. And as I say, if you've got an extra minute, I'd be really grateful if you could leave us a review. Anyway, I hope you found this episode useful. The takeaway here is clear. Strong boundaries are not restrictive. They are liberating. They allow you to focus on what you do best, serve your clients more effectively, and create a more positive and productive environment for your team and a healthy work-life balance for yourself. Now, I want to encourage you to take action on what you've learned today. Start by identifying one area where your boundaries need strengthening. Maybe it's your work hours or your service offering or your revision policy. Whatever it is, committing to make a change this week. Remember, setting boundaries is a skill, and like any skill, it gets easier with practice. You might face some resistance at first, both from others and also from yourself, but stick with it. The long-term benefits for you, your team, and your agency are immense. Thanks so much for tuning into the Agency Accelerator podcast. And until next time, here's to building stronger, more successful agencies through the power of healthy boundaries.